You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of a short story through to line edits of a full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
Get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you can join us, whether you're listening at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us, or if you're tuning in on AM radio, FM radio, internet radio at one of our rebroadcast outlets. Glad you'll be tuning in to us. Or if we're tagging along with you as a podcast, we're glad to be along for the ride. However you're listening, we're just glad you're listening to this show. Got an amazing show this week. Two great guests. First, Bob Dvorak, a journalist, in my opinion. A man who just recently wrote a book talking about his experiences being embedded when he was with the Associated Press during Operation Desert Storm with the 82nd Airborne. Imagine being a civilian. Now, Bob, whose nickname is now Bedouin Bob, thanks to those he traveled with and slept with, not in that way, folks, but slept in the desert with and defending the country. And the stories that he was able to relate to me during this interview and his experiences and his feelings on how to properly report from a war zone, and even talking about the state of journalism today. It's a great interview. I'm excited to present it to you. Can't wait for you to hear it later on in the show. We also have Michelle Owens on the show, a fellow attorney whose name I screwed up a whole lot and called Melissa a whole bunch of times, and I apologize in advance for that, Michelle. Michelle Owens is an attorney out of Tennessee that is seemingly falling into a new specialty of cases where she has to defend students on college campuses, specifically male students, who are being accused of certain sexual misconduct, not necessarily crimes, but misconduct in the so-called kangaroo courts that we have talked about in the past. We're going to talk to Michelle about all this and a whole lot more. It's a system gone mad, folks. The term kangaroo court gets thrown around a lot, but in this case it really applies because you have the same person employed by a college campus who is eminently not qualified to render judgment on such heavy issues, that is acting as victim advocate, investigator, prosecutor, and judge all at the same time. It's a crazy situation. We wonder how we got here, what she's doing to help out these students, many of which are being wrongfully accused, falsely accused, having their futures put in jeopardy by not only bad policy, but people lying about what happened in their circumstances, and what can be done to correct this trend put in place really by a letter from the Obama administration. We'll get into that later on as well. But first, before we get to those great interviews, which are coming up later in the show, I want to talk a little bit about this spending bill and this deal reached between Republicans and Democrats, where many conservatives, especially those friends of mine on social media, are claiming is an absolute fraud, sham, defeat, waste of a deal by the Trump administration, by House Republicans, and how it's a win for Democrats because of what gets funded in this bill. For those of you who have been living under a rock this week, with the imminent deadline approaching of a government shutdown, the White House and Republicans struck a deal, a $1 trillion compromise on 2017 spending, that the Trump administration is going around trying to convince people is a win for the administration. Now, this is the same deal that people have been talking about that has no funding for any sort of wall that President Trump wanted, that has funding for pet projects that Democrats want. There's discussion of Planned Parenthood funding not being cut off. They were unable to use this spending measure to strip Planned Parenthood of its federal funding. So pro-life leaders are up in arms. And just overall did not further any sort of conservative principles. Unless you talk to Mike Mulvaney, who is the White House's budget director, who's on record saying that they're very pleased with the bill, and that things that the Democrats wanted were excluded as well. For instance, they're saying from the White House that the bill did not fund measures that Democrats wanted, including aid to Puerto Rico and other measures. I mean, I don't know how high that is on the Democrat wish list, but okay. As we said, it doesn't fund the wall. They tout that there was $1.5 billion in border security funding, which may not be the actual wall, but is being touted as a very significant measure. Mulvaney is also touting school choice funding that resulted from this bill, which is expected to hit the floor of the House later on this week as we're recording this, but it'll be midweek, and it's expected to get to Donald Trump's desk right before the government shutdown deadline on Friday, so we'll see what happens there. Obviously, the big thing is the lack of border wall funding, which has to be seen as a big loss for the Trump administration. That didn't happen at this point. Will that mean that it won't happen down the line? I don't think so. We're talking about measures here very much in the infancy of this presidency, folks. And I get why, people would be overreactive, because these early battles set the stage later on for future battles in between and future negotiations. I think people can see things both ways. If you are pro-administration, then you are looking at this with such rose-colored glasses that you may be blind to actually what's going on here. The lack of funding of the wall, increases in domestic spending, not the cuts that Trump wanted. These are things that Democrats will be crowing about. But if you're on the side of the White House in the Trump administration, you're talking about the multi-billion-dollar increase in military spending, the $1.5 billion in border security, and you're claiming victory there as well. And you know what? This may seem like, to you, the essence of compromise. Both sides get something that they want. Nobody walks away from the table totally happy. And looky, you have your first piece of bipartisan legislation coming out of a Trump era. This is something both sides are going to end up supporting. That could be a good thing in the long run. Now, obviously, there's lots of Republicans who wanted to increase funding for other measures, and I'm sure that there are lots of Democrats that wanted to get funding for things like they said, Puerto Rico and things like that. But you count your victories where you can. Mike Pence has been on record saying that the military spending is a down payment on border security. This is a bipartisan win, according to Mike Pence. And, there are Republicans that are definitely not pleased. Money going to sanctuary cities, money going to Planned Parenthood, no money for the border wall. Conservatives have a right to be angry, but now you have to start playing deal maker. And that's what Donald Trump does best, according to him and according to most accounts. Do you walk away from a table with nothing and shut down the government? What do you do then if you're Donald Trump and you have a government shutdown and everybody's starting to dig their heels in? A win for Donald Trump means a bipartisan win in this particular case. Now, the White House is looking to cut non-defense programs. That got nowhere. $2 billion in extra funding for the National Institutes of Health is being said to be a good thing. And, we can go on and on about what measures are good and what measures are bad. But I think if you take your partisan glasses off for a second and recognize that Democrats are going to be voting for a piece of legislation supported by Donald Trump, you got to think that that's got to be progress and not the type of progress that you're thinking of in as far as, progressive politics. But that is maybe a softening of stance. That can be a foundation for future deals between Democrat leadership and Republican leadership. Maybe the Trump agenda gets put forward a little bit more when it comes to Obamacare, or when it comes to tax reform, or any number of issues that can come down the line. There's going to be bipartisan support for infrastructure deals in the future. This could all be just foundation building. Get what you can now. Build a base of trust between negotiating partners and see what you can get later on. Because we all know the battle here is not a sprint, folks. It's a marathon. That's kind of my take on it. It's a middle-of-the-road take, admittedly so. I'm very interested to see, I should say, what comes from this later on. We're going to take a quick break, but first we got to get the plugs out of the way. Again, thanks for listening to the show. Check us out at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us. I'm Gene Baradelli. This is Behind Enemy Lines Radio. Russ Gallo will be back with us very soon. We're working our way back to doing fully live shows again. But while you're listening to the show, I want to thank you for listening. Be sure to check us out at any one of our rebroadcast outlets, including WJHC 107.5 FM, Jasper, Florida, WDDQ 92.1 FM in Adel, Georgia, WLBB 1330 AM in Carrollton, Georgia, all part of the Red Nation Rising Radio Network. You can also check us out at KLRN Radio, High Plains Talk Radio and Sackheads Media, ICRN, the Internet's Conservative Radio Network, and Lanterns Radio, one of the great up-and-coming internet radio stations out there. Check them out at lanterns.buzz. But if you miss any of those rebroadcasts, don't worry. Not a problem. You're still good. Because you can find the show as a podcast on places where you find better podcasts all over the internet, including iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbay, Player FM. You can discover us on Google Play Music, SoundCloud, of course, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Whole bunch of places you can find us, and I'm sure that there's many more out there that I'm not even thinking of right now. We're going to take our first break of the show, and when we come back, we'll be talking with Bob Dvorak about his new book, about the time he was embedded as a journalist with the 82nd Airborne during Operation Desert Storm, as well as a discussion of the state of journalism today from a man who knows from which he speaks. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words. If you're a long-time listener of the show, or maybe this is your first time listening, you can probably tell that me and the gang here, we like to have our share of fun, whether it's on or off the air. We talk about 2-drink minimum radio and no medication Wednesdays or whatever day it may be. That's why when we found the people at Less Government, More Fun, we knew it was a match made in heaven with this show. Folks, we live in a time where government is out of hand. Our founding fathers did not intend government to be all-consuming in all parts of our lives. That's why we are telling you to go to lessgovmorefun.com, check out the website, check out the swag. What the people want is less government, more fun. Pass it on, make it happen.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save.
Your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org, brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines Radio is all about being right. No, seriously, it is. If you ever listen to Russ Gallo or me go back and forth on some issue, we always want to make sure that we remember who said what and when we said it. That's why we go to GoOnRecord.com. It's a brand new social media website. Challenge people on what they believe, whether it's in politics, sports, entertainment, finance, whatever. There's a category for you at GoOnRecord.com. Check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli, back behind Enemy Lines. Joining me on the line right now, it's a pleasure to welcome to the show a veteran, war correspondent, and author, Bob Dvorak. I hope you pronounced the name. I pronounced the name right because, you know, Baradelli is hard to pronounce, and I hate mispronouncing other people's names. How are you today?
Very good. It's great to be here, but at my age and what I've been through, it's great to be anywhere, Gene. And you got the last name right. Yes.
Oh, right. Look at that. Thank goodness, because, like I said, I hate doing that. So, listen, you've lived a very unique life, Bob, and a lot of it comes out in your most recent book, Drive On, The Uncensored War of Bedouin Bob and the All-Americans. It's a book that I'm definitely picking up because I have so many friends who are veterans and been in combat situations. But this is the first time I'm getting the pleasure of speaking to a war correspondent. How in the world did you get involved not only in journalism, but in such an extreme area of journalism that you actually are putting yourself in danger?
Just naturally lucky, I guess. No, journalism, it'll be 50 years in June when I got my first newspaper job, 10 days out of high school, and I worked my way through college doing that. From a small town in Pennsylvania, Uniontown, the southwest corner, and I just kept going until I was a national writer for the Associated Press based in New York City. And one day the boss walked by and said, "Hey, I want you to go to Saudi Arabia to cover the war." And I said, "For what, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years?" And he said, "Whatever it takes." And I was on my way. Now, of course, when I got that assignment, I knew right away my job was to get as close to war as possible so I could write about it. Because in the insane world of journalism, stories are best when the situation is worst, and what could be worse than a war? And through deft maneuvering on my part, I got assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division and went to war with them.
Now, that in and of itself is an amazing accomplishment to just even obtain the permission to travel and basically embed yourself with the 82nd Airborne. What was their reaction to finding out that they were going to have you tagging along with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be straight up front. I was more than embedded. When I showed up, the brigade commander, the colonel who was running the show, said, "I'll take you to war, and you live like we do and go where we go, but you got to join the unit." And he handed me the shoulder patches, the AA shoulder patches of the 82nd Airborne. And I said, "Okay, that's what I got to do. That's what I got to do." And it was and this happened several times, but Sergeant asked me, he said, "Did you volunteer to be here, or did somebody order you to?" And I said, "Well, I got the assignment, but, like you guys know, if you're in the 82nd, you got to volunteer. I want to be here because it's the biggest story in the world." They said, "Okay, are you getting any extra pay?" I said, "No, but they did double the indemnity on my life insurance policy, so I got that working." "Okay, you're going to war, but you don't have a weapon." I said, "No, as a civilian, I can't carry a weapon, but I have this portable typewriter, this Combat Olivetti, and some notebooks. So I got and an ID card that identifies me as a civilian in the company of the U.S. military." And I said, "Okay,
unreal.
If we jump, are you going to jump with us?" I said, "Absolutely. I'm here to go where you go and do what you do." So he said, "Okay, let me get this straight. You don't have to be here. You're not getting any extra money. You're not carrying a weapon into a combat zone. And if we jump, you're going to jump too. Mister, you're crazier than us."
And you know what? From the outside looking in, it does sound quite crazy. Because, again, you're jumping out of airplanes and you haven't really had the training to do so, right?
No, but, hey, Walter Cronkite in World War II made a glider landing in Market Garden, and there were some AP photographers who made combat jumps in Korea. Now, fortunately, I never had to test that theory, but I made the tailgate jump in Iraq, but I never had to jump out of an airplane.
Okay, so let's talk about that first experience, because now you're not only jumping out of an airplane, you're doing it in an area where there's extreme conflict. What were you told, right before?
What was that, Gene? What did you say?
Sure, I was trying to figure out, what did you make a jump with them?
No, I didn't. I never did jump, no.
Okay.
Just jumped out of the back of a Humvee, the tailgate jump, that's all I did.
Okay.
There was some disappointment that they never did get a chance to jump. I mean, this was the unit that drew the original line in the sand and then invaded Iraq, and they were convinced they were going to just jump into Baghdad and take out that big-talking son of a gun who made them spend 7 months in the desert.
Right. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Obviously there have been movies made about our soldiers in the Middle East and the harsh conditions that they were in. Do any of the visuals that we've seen either in newsreels or in cinema do the conditions any justice?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you spent a day in that desert, nobody would ever call it a 100-hour war. It's like this desolation, this vast sea of sand, nothing that you're used to as anyone who lives in America, and the heat and the way it just saps your strength. You almost have to feel the grit in your teeth in the heat of the sun and the way your eyes squint under this harsh light. And then, at night in the wintertime, it got so cold it would freeze the water in your canteen. So it was an environment of extremes, and the only things that can live out there are scorpions and sandflies. But yet there was a whole American army out there.
And you included, right?
Yes. Yes.
So the whole American army and you. Was there ever a time that you... Go ahead.
Well, that's how I got the name Bedouin Bob. They said I adapted so well to the desert and living out there with them in a hole in the ground that there was a major in the airborne who gave me the name Bedouin Bob because I just fit in so well with them. And that's what he said anyway.
That's great. Was there ever a time that you felt that your life was in immediate danger while you were with the 82nd Airborne?
Oh, maybe 5 or 6 times.
Is that all?
I laugh. I'll always remember. It was a Saturday, 26 years ago, when we invaded Iraq, and the main assault was going to start the next morning at 4 a.m., zero dark stupid, and I dug a hole to sleep in, and I was trained by the Army to do this because I was an old draftee. It's 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, 18 inches deep. It gets you out of the wind, and you stack all the dirt on the north side, so if an artillery shell lands, it might absorb a piece of shrapnel. But if you take a direct hit, there's nothing anybody can do. However, all they have to do is shovel the dirt back on top of you because you dug your own grave. That was the night I accepted the fact that I was already dead, so that I didn't have to worry about it. I would just do my job and get on with it. It was sort of like an out-of-body experience, is the way I described it.
Yeah, you kind of have to put your mind in another place to I guess, rationalize it, right?
And then there was the time, and it was right after the ceasefire, and you figure everything's over with. Ended up in the desert in a minefield that every time you take a step and you put your foot down, you think you might trigger something that's going to, turn you into pink mist. So,
oh my God,
that was an eye opener too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can't even rationalize all this, and yet you're experiencing all this and having the added responsibility of trying to relay these experiences back to people who, like me, have no conception of this. How are you able to string 2 sentences together?
The challenge at the time was, we live in this Twitter age, this instant communication. I had a portable typewriter I was under operational security, so I would have to type up something on a sheet of paper and hand it to a censor who would put it in a pouch, and a Humvee would drive it to an airfield, and it would fly back to the rear for everybody else to use. And the average time, I found out later, was 3 days. Now, that was the average during the Civil War to get something back from a battlefield. So there was this tremendous disconnect, I think, between what was really happening at the point of attack and what they were showing, at the briefings and with the news clips. So I always felt like I was a voice in the desert, and you get lost out there, which is my prime motivation to write all this stuff down now in the book.
Absolutely. Now the book is available right now, right? Or is it available? Is still to be released? Is it out already?
It is out, yes. And you can get it Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or anybody wants to shoot me an email at bdvorchak@msn.com. I'll get you an autographed copy out.
That's fantastic. And also check him out on Twitter at BedouinBob82. We're talking to Bob Dvorchak about his new book. And let me tell you something. My co-host Russ Gallo, who was actually in Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield, is someone that is going to be very interested in reading Drive On, The Uncensored War of Bedouin Bob and the All-Americans. I just wish he could have been here for this interview. It would have been fantastic. We'll get his reactions after the interview. But, Bob, I do want to touch on one thing that's kind of an aside comment, and that is comparing, based on your decades of experience and where you've gone and what you've done, comparing the state of journalism when you were working for the AP and doing all these crazy things in the Middle East compared to the state of journalism these days. And one of the things I would like you to touch on is the difference in the trust level that people have now compared to what they had when you were out in the middle of the desert doing things that very few people can be able to do. How have things changed so much? Is it because of social media, or is it the quality of journalists have just gone down?
Well, that's a very good question, and I haven't been asked that before, but it's a combination of things. One, the profession that I knew of being assigned to go cover a story to its conclusion and bringing it back does not exist anymore. And that's a condition of journalism, newspapers shrinking, and the number of reporters or experienced reporters being out there. That doesn't happen anymore. Two, like you mentioned, social media with Twitter and the internet and instant communication. The written word does not have the same worth that it once had. And three, the level of trust, I think, like many institutions in the United States, journalism, newspapers, people who write things down, just don't, it's just not there anymore. There's just been, I think, just so much distrust in everything that, who do you turn to as a source and say, okay, I can trust this person? And the other thing too is what writer is out there with the troops, is seeing it from the foxhole level, is experiencing the same conditions that these people are on the ground. And I'm sure there must be somebody, but boy, I'll be darned if I know who they are. It's just, it goes back to the tradition of Ernie Pyle, the World War II writer, who got down in the dirt and lived with the grunts and wrote about the face of war that wasn't being seen in the headquarters with the grand sweep of maps and things of that sort. You get a different perspective when you put yourself in their combat boots. I can tell you that.
Do you think that journalists are too worried about becoming famous themselves than they are about reporting the story?
Yeah. Well, anybody. See, my job in 50 years was to keep myself out of a story. I mean, I never inject myself in. I mean, as a writer, there are ways to do that without calling attention to yourself. But now it's, I don't think that's possible anymore. It's me, and look what I do, and I'm holding a mic, and I'm the scud stud, or whatever else. And to me, the basic saw of journalism was to get the story, but don't put yourself into it. And like I said, that the profession that I knew was gone. That's all. That's like Pony Express riders or John Henry with a steel driving man. That's all gone.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to end on a bad note. I just this book is going to be absolutely. I'm looking so forward to reading it. I really am. And the one thing I'm looking forward to seeing in it is, I'm sure that by becoming embedded with this group of people, these extraordinary people, that I'm sure that you had to have developed more of a deeper connection, not only to service in the military, but to these particular guys. Can you talk to us just briefly about the connection that you developed with the people that you were really working with?
Well, let me put it to you this way, Gene. There are airborne infantry grunts with wings on their chests that call me brother, because I went out there with them and ate their MREs and their crappy food and lived in the dirt and assumed all the risks and crossed the line into a war zone. And I loved them. And I say this, unabashedly. I love them only an older brother can. If you go through that kind of stress, with people and you share the risks and everything that goes with it, there's a bond. Shakespeare wrote about this, this we eternal band of brothers, and there's no other way to describe it. In some ways, I'm closer to them than I am to my own blood brothers, and I've been given status as an honorary member of Bravo Company, call themselves the Nasty Boys of the 2nd Battalion, 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment, and that's the greatest professional honor I've ever gotten in my life. No matter what award you win, if somebody in an infantry company calls you brother, there's nothing that can eclipse that. So yeah, there is a bond, there's an understanding, there's an empathy, there's an appreciation, and I say it's an undying respect, but respect is just love in plain clothes. I love these guys. I just happen to hate that they have to be in the business that they're in.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And that's a bond that few of us can say that they have. And one of the accomplishments, and what a great book this is. I keep saying I can't wait to read it. Drive On: The Uncensored War of Bedouin Bob and the All-Americans. It's available on Amazon and where finer books are sold. You can also check out Bob at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, doing some great work over there. Also, the Jerry Sandusky book that you wrote, Game Over, pick that up as well. And catch him on Twitter at BedouinBob82. Bob, this was a great interview. Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it, and good luck with the book.
I really enjoyed doing it. It's a pleasure to talk with somebody who really knows what they're talking about, and it gets to the meat of the issue without getting into all the other things. So this was a book I had to write. This was something I've been carrying around with me for 26 years. I just wanted to get it off my chest, and I think it's as pertinent today as it was back then. And
we're so glad that you did, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you real soon.
Have me on anytime. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey folks, I just want to let you know about a great opportunity for listeners of Behind Enemy Lines Radio. If you go to our website, www.behindenemylines.radio.us, and click on the SaneBox ad on the right side of the page, you will get a great opportunity for a discounted offer to join SaneBox. SaneBox filters out all the unimportant email from your inbox so that you can really focus on what matters. If you're anything like me, folks, you get hundreds of pieces of email a day, not many of which is important. SaneBox's smart filter will get everything you need to fly through your inbox and finally make email work for you. It gets rid of spam emails, it deprioritizes emails that aren't as important to you, and it helps you unsubscribe from mailing lists and individual senders with ease. So again, go to www.behindenemylinesradio.us and you click on the SaneBox ad and you'll be given an exclusive offer you won't find anywhere else.
The show will be right back. But first, a word from Al Sharpton.
Good evening, Rev. Thanks Good evening, to Rev. You, Ed. Is this Groundhog Day 2? We are watching. That was Attorney General Eric Holder, ABDs, about some Republicans at home are already beating the drums of war. Today, the Pentagon refuted that claim. And he said the American people do not want him to, quote, dwindling, they do not want him dwindling his thumbs. You can get a gig as a contortionist. Intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. We don't leave our women or men in uniform behind. It's a monument to the hubris of Dick Cheney, Representative Raul Labrador. Years of abuse. I personally apologized to Mr. Peebles. Just ask to soon-to-be former Congressman. Democrats are outright jitty. CIA's counterterrorism center. Veteran Affairs Secretary Shinseki. Why do I always mess up his name? Shinseki. I love my critics to have fun with that.
Politics Nation with the Reverend Al Sharpton starts right now. Good evening, Rev.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson.
But wait, there's more.
And we will much about that be committed. So there's no real conflict. Michael Druniak, including Lincoln himself, Daniel Day-Lewis. Behind Monica Lewinsky, the one and only Trey Songz is here. But Allison Lundergan Grimes, Gina Day Jesus. When Gina Day Jesus, Tea Party challenger Matt Bivens. People don't want to have their Social Security overall. The Republican savior, Mark Rubio's big night in evolution and Galileo. I mean, this whole thing of Galileo. America's changed. Unless IT and Skillets, President Putin doing something similar back in, it won't change this fundamental fact about the GOP. Just how absurd these attacks is. Nearly 6 months after the dangerous traffic jam, the Thai military says, my friend for many years, Ilyana Van Zandt, there's nothing there.
And they gave this guy a TV show? Let's get back to our show.
Gene Baradelli, back behind enemy lines. Joining me on the line right now. It wouldn't be a show if I didn't get to talk to another attorney. She is an expert in university Title IX cases and is actively combating university bias in these matters, and recently published an article in the Daily Caller talking about how campus zealots, and that is not an exaggeration, folks, are using a biased system and are taking away students' due process rights. We're talking to attorney Michelle Owens. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Like I said, it's always great to talk. It's always great to talk shop with another attorney. And we were off air just previously discussing how these Title IX cases are actually becoming a specialty in the field. That's crazy to me.
Yeah. Sadly, I mean, I wish that wasn't the case, and I'm actively fighting to diminish this part of my practice by changing what the law is and the way that the procedures are run. But right now, it's almost taken over my practice because there are so many of these cases coming forward.
Right. So let's briefly explain what these Title IX cases are and how they developed.
Sure. Well, it's there's always been Title IX, and people, I'm at the higher end of 40, but people my age, kind of think of Title IX as something to do with sports. Equal opportunities for girls in sports.
Exactly right.
And that's what it was intended to. Yeah, that's what it was intended to do. Discrimination, prevent that. Well, somehow it has developed into rape being a discriminatory act, and to me, that is mind-blowing in and of itself. But back in 2011, and stop me if I get too technical, but back in 2011, the Department of Education has within it an Office of Civil Rights, and they wrote something called the Dear Colleague Letter. And unless you're in this field, you think, so what? What's a Dear Colleague Letter? Well, it's something that gives instruction on universities on how to handle Title IX sexual assault cases. And they've kind of developed this whole protocol for how universities are required to handle sexual assault and sexual harassment. And I think it started because, there probably was a problem. And rape is a real thing. I mean, I know people who have been raped on college campuses, and it's a real thing, and it does need to be handled effectively. But, at one university right now, there are 30 Title IX cases coming across the Title IX desk a week. There are not 30 rapes at that college every week. That is asinine to think that. So this letter developed, and cut me off anytime because I'm a lawyer and I'll just keep talking. But
no, you're on a roll. Keep going. You're on a roll.
This letter, because I hate it, it makes me so mad. This letter requires that every college have a Title IX coordinator, and they find these people who are about 27 years old. They're always female, and they have their own personal agenda. And even if you go to a really conservative school, if you dig into the Title IX coordinator, they're very liberal, and they're feminist, and, and there's a place for that, but this is not it. Because what happens is these boys get accused of sexual assault, come in, and they're faced with someone with their own personal agenda. Maybe they've been victimized, or they feel like they have been. So they're thought of as guilty from the get-go. But what this Dear Colleague letter did is it changed several things, and it changed the standard of review to preponderance of the evidence, which there's not, in law school they teach you there's no really definition of this, but it's basically, I believe the girl a little bit more than the boy, and that's the definition of guilt.
Right, and for those of you out there that may not, and for those of listeners out there who may not understand what that means, think about, a typical, just in your everyday life, like a car accident or some other minor thing where there's an injury. You only have to get, level. And for something as serious as a sexual crime alleging to happen, that is a very low bar.
Well, yeah, it basically means that y'all are almost even, we don't know who to believe, but we're going to go with the girl. I mean, really? That's how it works? What I'd like to do is tell you what a normal interview and allegation looks like from the point of the accused.
Absolutely, go ahead.
That kind of outlines how the Dear Colleague letter established that these things need to be handled. So what happens is, and it's always a boy. I've heard of one case right now of a girl, and I think if girls start getting accused, it might change the story a little bit, but it's always a male, and they get a letter via email from their university that says you've been accused of, and it has a box check, sexual assault or sexual harassment. You don't know what it is. The only thing you know for sure as the accused student is the girl that accused you. You don't know when she accused you. A lot of times these are relationships these people have had, and almost always the relationship has ended months before. I have one that was 18 months in the past. So you think back 2 years, you're like, when did she say I either assaulted her or harassed her? So you don't know when, you don't know what the specific event was, and then you're told that you have to defend yourself against it. And imagine trying to defend yourself against something that you don't know what it is. I mean, I could defend myself a lot better if I knew what it was. And then you're told you can't have a lawyer present to help you. Now, obviously, this is what I do, so I do come into play, but I kind of am the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, and I interview all the witnesses first, and I help these 19-year-old witnesses and the college students, tell their story better.
How is it that they can deny? How is it that they can deny someone a right to counsel?
Because these universities are their own little fiefdoms, and they are not required by law to provide counsel for somebody. Legally, and you know this, you're not really required to be provided counsel unless it's a criminal act. Now, to deny you the right to even have an attorney is very specific to the universities and to this Dear Colleague letter. And that's the due process issue that a lot of attorneys are challenging, because they are depriving you liberty, even though there's an argument that they're not. But especially with the state colleges, which brings the state into play and the federal government into play, it is the point is that it is depriving you of liberty in which you should have due process. So how can they do it? I wish I knew.
Right, and this is like a pseudo-criminal issue, because you're not... Are there instances where there are these charges brought, let's call them charges for now, because I can't think of any other word for it, where these charges are brought, but there is no police involvement brought in, so there's no arrest or no police investigation?
Yeah, I guess I should have started with that. I've never had one that the police was involved in. These women don't go to the police. If I was raped, I'm going to the police, because what I want is the guy behind bars. I don't want him just kicked out of school. I mean, really? So no, the police are never involved. And you know what? On cases where the police are involved, they are found innocent, the accused is, it doesn't matter to the school. They still proceed as if that hadn't happened. They do their own investigation, and the people investigating are literally 26 years old. They've had no legal experience. They aren't lawyers. They aren't judges. They, barely have started life, and they're making the determination of who's telling the truth.
So what is the criteria for hiring someone like that, though? That they just happen to have your point of view? Nothing. That's crazy.
I guess they need a college degree because they're working in a school, but, other than that, not much.
And there's no indication of whether, can this investigator, quote unquote, counsel people as to whether they should bring a charge or not?
Yes, they can. And what happens is they meet usually with a Title IX coordinator, and then she sends that person on to an investigator. And it's supposed to be impartial, but she's sending them to her subordinates who report to her. She's the boss. So when she sends them someone and says, you need to, listen to her, she might have a complaint, they're going to take it. I've never heard of them not filing a complaint on a girl, for a girl.
So the person that is supposed to be neutral actually gets involved in the beginning in determining whether and counseling an alleged victim as to whether they should bring some. Kangaroo court is an apt phrase for this, because you have a prosecutor basically and a judge acting in dual roles together against someone who then is not allowed to have someone advocate for them.
Yeah, and the problem with it really is that I'm not kidding you when I say every single boy I've represented has been innocent. I mean, I'm a woman. I'm not going to represent somebody that I think actually raped a girl. They haven't done it. It's been consensual sex, and in 2 of my cases, there has been no sex at all, and the girl made it up. And, in fact, one of them, I won, and they said, yeah, you're right, she made it up. But they kicked him out of school anyway because they said he made the investigation difficult. And I guess that was because he had me as a lawyer. So, really, having a lawyer gets you kicked out of school now. That's crazy.
This is astonishing to me, and there was no ramifications or consequences for the girl who made it up.
No ramifications at all. And we're going to sue the school because that's all we have left to do. And, initially I would tell people, I'm not going to encourage you to sue the school because it's just going to drag out, and it's not what your student wants. It's not what they want. They just want to get back in school. But when you get kicked out and you didn't do anything, and it stays on your record and makes it difficult to get into another school, you're left with no recourse but to sue.
Absolutely right. That you have to, restore your good name. Now, heavens forbid someone who didn't commit any type of assault in this field, or and is still found to have done some wrongdoing. Is there any type of appeal process that they can go through, or are they just left with it?
Only through the school. Only through the school. I have had one that I've lost. I'm actually pretty good at this, so I usually do enough background that so far I've been able to at least get the damage minimized where no one gets kicked out of school, which, is sometimes small. That's not really very gratifying when you know you're innocent. But I had one that we lost straight out, but on appeal, we won it completely, and which was really, really good because this poor boy was in an ROTC. He had an ROTC scholarship, and so that brings the military into it, and that means that if he had lost, he would have had to pay back the $40,000 scholarship he had received, and if he couldn't pay it back all in one chunk, which he couldn't, he was required to enlist in the military immediately. And enlisting in the military immediately these days probably means you're getting deployed. So that is astonishing, and everybody in the United States should know this is happening.
This is absolutely unreal to me. Do they keep any records of the counseling of the women? Because, my legal brain, and you're talking about, getting too far into the weeds. Let's get into the weeds for a second. My legal brain is telling me, that there's got to be some recourse of having, for these victims who are innocent. I'm saying the victims now are the people who are being wrongfully accused, into seeing what efforts, if any, were made by these counselors to actually cajole and to convince someone to bring a charge, rather than listen to the charge and make up their own mind, listen to the advice and the options they have, and then making up their own mind. Is there any theory under which you could go after a school for promoting a false charge?
Until you've said that, I've not thought of it, but I'm going to add it in to my next lawsuit I do, because that's a really good point. Because they do that for the girl. I know that they do that. And the other thing about it is that these boys get really depressed and suicidal. And part of my background, one reason I started doing this is that I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. And so I have that background of dealing with therapy. And these boys get suicidal, and there is no support for them. No support at all on the campus. They, allegedly the Title IX coordinator is there for them, but I had one case where the Title IX coordinator gave the victim his cell phone number and said, call me anytime you have a problem. Did he do the same for my client? No. There was no one that would help him. Absolutely no one.
Absolutely. It is the
it's
most
unreal.
crooked thing I've ever heard of. This is something you think about in third world countries happening to people, not on college campuses in the greatest country in the world.
No. And one thing that bothers me is that I don't think women understand what's happening. You know, I have sons. I have a husband. People who have children and this happens to them, they suddenly become the biggest advocates of making it stop. Women who might have been a feminist, they still say, wait, this isn't fair. And there are feminists out there who have made very public statements about how wrong this is because it's not fair. And nobody understands that, you know, we're not just giving women a chance to come forward without, you know, being embarrassed, but we're just assuming the guy is guilty without giving him any kind of fair shot at it.
It's absolutely crazy. So listen, if you ever need to be Pro Hoc Vitaed into New York, I'm happy to do it with our firm. Folks, if you...
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you know someone, or if you're a family member or whoever is having to endure this sort of absolute craziness, go to Title9Representation.com. A.G. Owens Cooper, great website, by the way, when you check it out, and tell them your story and realize that this is not the way life is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you know, everyone's rights are supposed to be protected. It's supposed to be a neutral investigation and determination of facts. Understand that this isn't you have options, and you need to avail yourself of these options, and you don't just be a punching bag for someone's agenda.
I guess my final thought is if you know anyone who is going through this, they are not alone. It happens to hundreds and hundreds of boys across the country, and you need to get a lawyer. No matter what they say, you need a lawyer who can help you navigate through this because it does make a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely get yourself represented. Folks, check out, again, Title9Representation.com. This has been great. Thank you so much. I'm glad we're bringing this issue out to everyone because it really needs to be discussed more.
Thank you very much.
And that'll do it for this week's show. I want to thank our guests for coming on the show, Bob Dvorak, Michelle Owens. Thanks so much for coming on. But right now it's time to shut this sucker down. From the People's Republic of New York, Gene Baradelli, behind enemy lines, we are out of here. Next week, another great show, but until then, good night, folks.
Our position has been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. A Rock Radio production. Copyright 2016. Back in 7 days. Out.